this is another one of those things that's hard for me to articulate. I could probably take the time and do a much better job sitting and writing it. But there is something different in the experience of doing a long form, generally unedited video. And I've made one edit so far, and that was just because I had to close my door because there was some noise outside. And you'll see the lighting change. I'm sure I'll be doing more editing in the future, but it's still going to be me sitting down, one-shotting. And there's something very different about writing an idea versus writing it for scripting, for speaking it, versus being in a safe environment chatting with friends. That's not quite the same as being in the classic is a coffee shop. I mean, I grew up, our fun was going to a coffee shop and chatting because, I mean, it's kind of before the internet back in my day. Okay, so there's this notion that I've been bouncing around in my head, and I haven't really faced the fact that there haven't been tools for me to understand these notions with. And I ended up realizing that I'm coming to terms with certain facts as I am inventing the language to help me understand it. And there's a concept that I've got called writer's block immunity, where at one point I realized that I don't actually know, I don't understand what writer's block is. I must have experienced it before. I mean, certainly if you're in school and you've got to slog through some essay or other, you're going to get something there. But in terms of creative writing, it's not a thing. I've got a little flag in my head that says I kind of experienced it once, and it was kind of a surreal experience. But I mean, it may as well be I was hungry and just need to stop and go. My mind tends to be so flooded with forks in the roads as I'm writing that I have to rein things in, not find a way to pull myself out of being mired and not having choices. So I would say it's not like saying that a person has a talent. So I can't say, oh, I'm talented. That's why I don't do the writer's block thing. I think it's just the nature of the way I think, coupled with something like talent, but certainly not skill, because I didn't have the words to really understand what's going on. And I don't think a person can really adopt skill unless they are pulling it out from what they see, and unless they can pull it using words or seeing examples or something like this. And I never had anything like that except for television. And television, when I think about this topic, I think about sitcoms. And sitcoms are like everyday people, exaggerated people in exaggerated situations, and it's entertaining to see how things work out. And a lot of that is good. A good sitcom is rarely surprising. And as opposed to like a drama, which is going to have twists and mysteries and stuff like that. A sitcom is going to be like, it's not exactly bubblegum for the mind, but it is light. It is light. It is often light and safe and just nice to have on, and you can still do plenty of thinking. But the show isn't about that. Whereas other shows they will intentionally bring up thought experiments, and the entire show will be a what if, or an alternate reality or something like this. But a sitcom, I think I might have learned a lot of this from watching sitcoms. And it's interesting, as a kid, I didn't know I would be this, whatever I am. Now, I don't think people can really understand how they're changing as they're growing. I think that's fine. Maybe that's actually really good. I don't know. Maybe that's a sign of my being ungrounded and drifting and not having solid guidance and all this kind. Maybe, or maybe it's just I've got one of those minds that I was floating around until the right winds came along, and oh hey, I'm not a balloon, I'm a kite, and now I'm driven towards the direction of appreciating my writing as opposed to watching stuff or being a passive. Actually, I really still love consuming media, specifically videos. And so I think I'm still, some part of me is still like what I was way back then. At any rate, it's hard for me to know where this came from. And so it's hard for me to really know how to convey any of it. And I think it's valuable for me to try to replicate some version of this for some other people. And there's a trap that educators have that, okay, there's a difference between education, which is like there's a lesson plan that smart people invented and described everything, and then that gets distilled down, and then people who are specialized in education make lesson plans, and then people who are specialized in teaching teach the lesson plans, and that gets conveyed into students. Like there's that kind of stuff, which is fine, but there's another way where, let's say, we have some of the founders of our philosophies, or of various other little things, or of community leaders, or all. There are people who have qualities that we aspire to also attain, and sometimes those people either do it or are convinced to try to help other people get to somewhere like where they are. So for example, we see somebody's exceptionally good and kind, and we want to get like that, and we want to feel happier or less nervous around certain situations, and so we'll pay attention to people who are giving motivational speeches that talk about how they learned to motivate themselves and get up early and do all these things, how they became successful. And those people, what they do is let's say that let's ignore problems of like people doing it for a living and charlatans and people doing it because they want the attention and all. Let's just think of the pure idea of a person who's up there, who what we will do is, there's a trap where people think we think at some level that we are more alike than we really are. It's really weird. We've got this rift where we think we're completely special, and yet we think that it's possible for us to be good in some aspect, and for the path that we meander down to get to that goodness can also be the path that other people can take to get that goodness. It's like a parent has the best of intentions for educating a child. We're going to imagine that kind of relationship. And so the parent will say, okay, I'm going to make sure that none of the hurdles that I had to face, all the challenges, all the disastrous missteps, the mistakes, the errors in judgment, I'm going to smooth as much of that out as possible. So good parenting will take their child and raise them I don't want to say insulated, because insulating a child is going to make a broken, incapable adult, a dependent that happens to be old. And they're either going to be dependent on the parents for forever, and they're going to be dependent on the school structure or their friends or the state or whatever role model they latch onto. So it's not about insulating the child from troubles, but it's about kind of smoothing down the rough edges of the things that the parent had already experienced to bring them there. So you can imagine somebody who has a piece of knowledge that they want to help somebody. It's not like bring it from experts down to teachers and conveying it in a textbook. It's somebody trying to nebulously help a person kind of be the better version of themselves, for example, learn a skill that doesn't really have the words. And there's a problem where that's never going to be perfect, obviously, because no two people are, by the way, no two people are exactly the same. And so a parent conveying all that to a kid, the kid's going to make their own new magical, disastrous decisions. But hopefully, if a good parent will have toughened them enough that those mistakes won't completely flatten them, that they'll have the good social and good discipline and all these other skills that will help that child grow up into a really solid, functioning, one-day parent. And when conveying a nebulous piece of philosophy and knowledge, a lot of people, they only know to convey the steps that they took and the steps that they think would be smoother for others. And they convey a different version of things, because you can't go back and live my life to get where I am. You can't do that for anybody. And I can't describe all of the path that took me to the idea that I want to present. And I can't know you well enough that I can craft a version of a path for you to take from where you are to navigate through the current times for your life to get to somewhere that is appropriate for you. I can't know any of that. It's so hard. So if I were to convey something about how I write and how I think that would make having writer's block not actually a thing, like actually a confusing concept, I'm going to do it wrong. Now, I've been thinking about it and trying to find the words to describe what's going on in my head. And I actually did I'd already talked on this, a failed hour-and-a-half long stream that was, it was wonderful. And it went over so much to actually demonstrate my writing for the little shorts that I do just as practice. And frankly, at this point, I think if that's all I ever do, that I get some really good to me stuff. So I've been working on trying to describe ways of understanding that such that they can be conveyed. And the tool that I've been using is Sitcom Writing. And Sitcom Writing is where you've got, like, sitcoms, first season is usually kind of crap, and second season it really figures itself out. And there are reasons for that. And the reason is that the characters aren't fully defined because they haven't experienced enough things in their episodes to become, there's another concept that I will speak on in the future. They will not have created their own little bit of canon for each character in each place, to make it obvious how a new event, a new situation will demand a certain kind of personality and response from the character. So the classic example that I have in mind is to talk about this is the TV show The Simpsons. Now, it back when it started, it was absolutely awfully ugly. I mean, it was really abysmal. And it caught on because it's got some exaggerated, interesting characters. Like they're cartoons, so they're not people, so they don't have to work or act like people. And that distance lets them do some really weird, entertaining things. And I would call him the lead character, Homer Simpson, because he's the most obvious, exaggerated. Like he's easy to keep in mind, and you can pluck that character out and put him into some new situation, and you know how that character is going to work because there are certain personality traits. So I can make something up right now. Okay, so we've got Homer. He's got the day off, but he's really frustrated with work. So, he kind of played sick because he doesn't like his job anymore. And he wants to go and do something else because he sees his friend is having a whole lot of fun. So he's like, hey, can I play hooky from work and then come and like kind of hang out with you at work? And his friend's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So you already know that, Homer's maybe he's going to get lost going there. Maybe he's going to be completely overwhelmed because he has no idea what's going on because he actually had a really solid job that suited him. And he just doesn't have what it takes at this new job. So maybe they'll like put him somewhere where there's basically he would have the exact same job that he used to have. It just happens to be in a different looking room with like different paint. And because that's all he could be trusted to do. That's all he knows how to do. That's all he's good at. And so like, hey, you can help us out today, sit him in the chair and maybe not even have him realize that nothing has changed in his life. That he's just pushing that light goes on, he pushes that button. That light goes on, pushes that button. And you know how that's going to work. You know how that plays out. And you know what happens when a donut tray kind of passes by him. Here, take a donut. And he takes everything but one donut. And certain things become really obvious. And you can just pull that character up. Next episode, plunk him down in some new situation. And it's really, really obvious. There is a canon that has made that character so easy to understand. It has constrained that character such that it has a physicalness to it. It has a tangibility to it that lets it move to new episodes, and the episode will write itself. And obviously there's more to it, but it's not hard in the sense of knowing how a character is going to work. Like that doesn't have to be really made up. It's already kind of done. You just look at the backlog of episodes, pay attention. A writer would have to pay attention with kind of their intuition, and then they will understand the character. They shouldn't really be taking notes unless they're actually using some piece of past knowledge in some other episode to carry either a story arc, or because they need to refer to certain things very specifically because they want to appease the audience who are highly sensitive to certain things, like what kind of chair does he have at work? Well, there was this one episode that was about that chair. You got to take notes for that one so that you can reuse the chair currently. So if I said something like inanimate carbon rod, there's an episode with that. And so if I had that brought up again, I would have to go back and take notes looking at that other episode. So in terms of my understanding, the writer's block immunity has to do with me understanding sitcoms. And again, I took The Simpsons as an example. whereby all of the writing that has been done in the past has created more and more solid pieces of unique, of separate-ish canon that will now make it obvious how to use those pieces together in any particular situation. And as the situation changes, it becomes obvious as all those pieces already have a life. And so I will eventually be describing this in significant detail by actually writing and talking about it. But the basic nature is something like writing as jazz, which is, imagine that you've got a 3-piece jazz band. The idea behind classic jazz is these are all people who know their instrument, or more than one instrument, and they have played before things, and they've played songs with actual sheet music. They know some stuff and they've listened to some stuff, but they're sitting and they're getting together and they don't have a plan. And so there's a kind of exploratory writing version of the experience of the players in a jazz band. And they're just sitting at a club, and one person's playing with bass and the other person is doing something else. And they listen to one another, and there are these little cues that they drop. Maybe they've got some experience with one another, and they just keep going and going. And characters or objects in just writing as fun, writing as jazz, it can be loose, but there's still talent in each little node. And the bits of canon, the bits of defined stuff for each of the little bits in a story, each of those comes with a great history of how that thing has acted in the past and the kind of canon that has carried forward that demands a certain thing. Okay, so that was a roundabout way to say that stories are made with units of canon. And as an author continues in say a sitcom, continues episode to episode, each of the objects, of the items, be they characters or places or things or whatever, it becomes more and more obvious how real, how solid, how consistent that thing is as it's being used every single episode, such that season 1 is going to be meandering. It's going to have really solid writing. Let's imagine that we have that we're studying a show that has made it past 3 seasons, and we're doing like critical analysis or whatever the heck, and we're looking back, and you'll be able to see that the pilot episode will be solid. That's why the show got sold, and then it will have this kind of like shaky beginning, and then it will get just better and better, and then it's got its stuff together. Season 2 it's really got it together, and by season 3 everybody's totally on board. All of the characters make sense as they're in every episode, whereas earlier on things were a little bit awkward and didn't just, there's a certain feeling that isn't there yet. That's the same with writing for anything, but it's not just characters, it's everything that exists in any particular sentence, every character, every object. So for example, I know what chairness is. I know what a chair is. I know what it looks like. I can think about where it is, why it is. I can think about all kinds of things about its appearance. I know its temperature, and I know all kinds of stuff about a chair. And if I take chair and I put it anywhere, it comes with a canon history of what chair is. And being open to the idea that every single one of the things being described in writing, every single one of them has this existence to it, this old Greek concept of the essence of the object. Understanding that stuff is real, and then letting it inform certain decisions, certain paths in storytelling, or in just assembling scenes or moments, allowing all that canon to come in and removing it's like the writer removes a little bit of their responsibility, because I don't get to choose a lot of how chairs work. Like, I say chair, I know what a chair is. I'm relying on the fact that my audience is going to know what a chair is. I can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, chairs, there's a lot of different kinds of chairs, and I can make up something. I can do all kinds of awesome stuff with it. But the essence of chair is a thing that I am constrained by, that I'm allowing myself to be constrained by. And by submitting myself to the canon of pre-existing material, I'm actually making it so that I'm forced to make certain choices. So when I did that video, I think I did start with a chair, and I didn't talk quite like this. It's different every time. But I can say, okay, well, I have a chair. Well, where is the chair? Where do chairs go? Do I want it to be where chairs go, or do I want it to be someplace where chairs don't normally go? Like, do I want to put it at the bottom of the ocean, on a shipwreck? Do I want to make it broken? Do I want to make it new? What kinds of things are chairs made of? If it's old, should it be like wood and then painted, and the paint is flecked off, and that's how I can convey that it's old? And there's all these different things that will shower down, that every one of them they're easy to address. There's a bike shed problem. The bike shed problem is, you go to a bunch of people and you ask them, well, I'm going to get a bike shed, and I don't know what color I should be painting it. And everybody's going to say, oh, well, I've got. Everybody's going to not just have an opinion, they're going to very quietly feel like they ought to give it because they think that it ought to be easy, right? It's like, one person is going to say, well, it should be red. It's the classic red, of course. It's going to look great. Then the next person is going to say, like, red's really bright. Let's say that they're all independent people that are being interviewed for their opinion. The next person says, well, green should be that nice, solid, dark green. That's just gorgeous. That's classic. And the next person over is going to say, well, you don't want it to stand out in your garden because you're working on your flowers and stuff. You need to kind of make it a bit of a beige, make it kind of out of the way and like subtle. That way you can plant around it. The next person over is going to say it should just be straight white. And the next person is going to say, well, okay, look, bike sheds, they get dirty over time. So you really don't want it to be a bright color at all. You do want it to be glossy so that the dirt will kind of not stick to it, so you can put a garden hose on it. But in terms of color, you kind of want it to be a little bit on the brown side, just a little. And everybody's got an opinion, and they're all viable to explore. And for you as an author having these different objects at play, you're going to have a lot of choices on what color of chair you want. And it's going to present itself, instead of being like a block of, I don't know what should happen now, it's going to be a flood of which one of these nearly infinite choices should I choose? What combination of stuff should I pull together and make my nice chair? Is it inside? Is it outside? Is it wrought iron outside? Is it a bench? All these possibilities are all there, and that's just from one thing. But that's from the essence of chairness that's coming down. And that's the exact same thing for any character. I can have a character. I can say that I've got a chair. Okay, well, I've got a chair. It's outside. It's in the back, and it's outside. Okay, well, what kind of chairs would be appropriate for outside? I could make it like wrought iron. I could make it wood. Let's say it's wood. Okay, it seems nice. But if it's wooden outside, it's going to kind of rotten or be old. I don't want that feeling. I'm going to make it in like a balcony out the back, so it's in good shape. It's good shape. Okay, so it's an old chair, but it's in good shape. Sounds good so far. And it's out the back. Well, it's protected from the rain, so it's going to have like a little roof or something over that area. I could put it in a gazebo. That sounds kind of nice, but that's not quite what I'm going for. Back of the house, big roof that goes over. Okay, I'm thinking of a certain kind of house. Well, you're going to have those big posts at the back of the house, and maybe you want it to be this big open area. And suddenly all of these different choices present themselves, of not just chair, but of where it goes, what it looks like. Well, why is it out there in the first place? Now, what are chairs for anyway? Chairs are for, well, usually sitting on, but you don't have to go there. But, okay, well, if there's somebody sitting on it, what kind of person? Why? What time of day? What are they doing out there? You could have like somebody sitting there tying their shoes, and already it's like a few objects in, and there's just questions, and it becomes more and more obvious which questions ought to be entertained. And the more that is explored, is the more a kind of mood appears in your head. So I'm already thinking of a nice spring day with flowers at the back of the yard, and maybe it's a farmstead, and it's like a little girl tying her shoes, and she's got her oversized hat that her mom gave her secondhand over there, and like all this stuff happens, and then you ask a lot of whys. You ask, like, well, why would she be outside right then? Why would she? Okay, she's small, so maybe she can't reach her feet very well, and so she kind of like pulls one foot up, and she's tying her shoelaces kind of sideways, and she can't quite get that right yet. But like, dad is back there just giving her some space to let her kind of practice and let her get it right, and he doesn't want to hurt her feelings by, I'll do it. No, you're not doing it right. He won't do anything like that. He's just letting her give it a try. And if she asks for help, then she asks for help. And you've got another character suddenly. You've got a mood. Why is she out there? Maybe they're going to church on Sunday. Maybe they're going for a walk. Maybe they're going to go buy groceries. Maybe. And they're all just questions. At no point is there some sort of desert of ideas. At no point is there a block. Now, if you're talking about plot, if you're talking about thinking from all the way back in chapter 1 through the subtleties of story building to find a kind of arc that gets either subtly or intentionally built, that goes places, that has many different branches, and there are many different arcs that all collide and influence and all come to some crescendo at the end. If you're talking about writer's block for that, okay, that's a thing. Fine, that's a thing. But one of the great advantages with freeing oneself by becoming constrained by canon. So now you've created a little girl. Okay, well, little girl with dad. Okay, well, little girl with dad, little girl should be quite young if she's got trouble with her shoelaces. So you've already created, like, what are we talking about? Under 6 years old? under 8 years old? What are you thinking now? Like she's just getting to the point of tying her own shoes. How old would that be? Like 5? 5 sounds good. And those are questions that just now created canon for that character. And now you can put that character in any situation. And depending on what the mood you have is. So the lovely afternoon, spring day, flowers in the backyard, all this kind of stuff, the mood of the dad just kind of being there, really appreciate that it's his daughter's growing up. There's a mood there, and I'm not going to go, okay, well, they're on the way to the grocery store and there's a car accident. It becomes obvious how wrong that is, unless that's something you explicitly want to pursue. It becomes more obvious that it's a wonderful day out and there's a little bit of wind. The only real wind that's happening is from the car. Okay, it's a convertible. Hey, let's put a dog in there, and dog hanging their head out the side of the standard stuff. But in terms of plot, you do have to manufacture a situation and put it there. Dog hops out of the car when it's pulling into a parking lot and just goes noot. And that's not too bad. I mean, that's pretty bad, but that's traumatic for a 6-year-old, let's say. And you got like a plot point and you can kind of explore that. But it becomes really obvious how things will play out because the characters have been so solidly created that the writing has made it obvious what those characters are like and how they act. The little girl, because she's thinking, because she's growing and she's trying, she's learning, and because she's learning on purpose, maybe she insisted that today she's going to tie her own shoes because she wants to, and so she's kind of just barely growing. So maybe there's a moment when she's going to crack and recede back into like just bawling because she thinks she's never going to get her dog back. Or maybe that's another little moment of challenge where she grows a little bit more and just pauses and looks at dad and just holds back the tears. And maybe you've got moments like that. And having really solidly crafted characters will make it so obvious that when situations, you can manufacture whatever situation, and the characters plunked in that situation, it will just become more and more obvious how they're going to act. How's dad going to act? Maybe it's a small town and it's not a big deal. Maybe the dad is gonna just kind of cross his arms and look at her and not say anything, and she's gonna and like get kind of cute mad and go after the dog, right? Because that's her growing up, and because you've already created a kind of almost slightly getting to be a little bit more independent. And maybe it becomes really appropriate that's kind of how that character would act. How would the dad act? Well, he's not gonna let her out of his sight because we've already established that he cares and he's paying attention because we had that happen earlier. So we're gonna do it again. That's obvious. And we're removing any sense of real risk of having a kid run off or having a dog run off. So it's not a big city and the dog's not running into traffic and the kid's not running through a big mall after a dog all on her lonesome with the dad kind of going off and doing something different. We're totally, it becomes really obvious how all that stuff should work. So my idea of writer's block immunity is creating the kind of canon constraint by exploring the higher nature of the things that I have and having this fuzz of possibilities and just pulling out all the stuff that I think is interesting and having them all kind of interact with one another until each different thing becomes a more solid kind of little canon in the term, in the scope of the universe I'm creating for that short story, for example. And then you can invent a situation, or it becomes kind of obvious what would be interesting for those characters. And I want to, and that's kind of how I explore with my writing. And I've done, okay, so I've talked about it. I've got 4 books up there that you can see. So there's the orange ones that have the little label that I haven't actually touched. They're new, always carry a spare. So if I run out, I don't have to run to a store right away. And those are the ones I've made, and those are like Agatha Christie. And so, and I've got a 5th over, and I got a 5th over here. So I'm not trying. And I think, and I've just had fun doing this. And I think that other people can do this and have fun. And I think that it's possible for a person who's either a new writer to get involved and engaged, because it's really easy to write like this. It's really easy to think like this, because you've seen a chair, you know how chairs work. It's not hard. You don't have to think about plot right now. You can just think about characters and explore things. And I'm wondering these days if it's possible for somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language to have this as a tool in their toolkit to explore the language and write, because they already know their version of a chair is fairly universal, right? It is now, everybody knows what a chair is. And they can, a person who doesn't speak English as their first language can assemble versions of stories using their native language. And then, but trying to explain things in English, it would be a fascinating thing to practice in this way. And it actually creates something substantial at the end, something that's more than just, writing your lines of repeating sentences or things like that. It's more creative, more involving. I'm now exploring what it would be like to try to convey this and how it would be received for somebody who wants to get better with English by using a tool like this. It's like the difference between a person who's learning by rote, who can memorize and understand and repeat, and who knows grammar and stuff like that, and somebody who they want to explore. And I think there's an exploring mind that exists that it is quite a bit different than the other side. And I could talk about this, but there's the 2 kinds of minds for creativity, specifically for writing. And I think that the looser, more frankly, more creative side, the more exploratory, the more kind of untethered side of things would actually find learning English more interesting and engaging by using a practice like this. So I've got in mind either young writers who really should try, and people who kind of want to learn English, and this is just like a really cool way of them getting, it's much better than looking at a newspaper or an article and then translating. It's way more interesting to actually create some piece of art than to go through a lesson plan for some people. So that's something that I'll explore in the future. So I intend to create a playlist of me exploring these ideas and creating examples and just going and seeing what happens with it, to see if I can help others, like just write